Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Jesus Connect Leaders series. I think you'll really enjoy this one. We've got Matt Cook here today, and he is the VP of Business Development for CashTech Currency Products, which doesn't sound that exciting, but it's actually, really helping to finance and build the burgeoning cannabis industry in the kind of USA and Canada. So his background comes from investment advice, software, and recruitment and digital marketing, and now he's working in another kind of growth field. He's scaled up a number of businesses successfully. So if anyone's interested in that, this is a great one to listen to. And had a really, really great chat. So without further ado, here's Matt Cook. Matt, hi, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm very well today. Yes, I'm in a different venue today, as you may be able to see if you're watching the video. You usually watch this, not you, but our listeners. I'm in my mum and dad's house today, so yeah, I've changed my location. So we're recording from Cirencester, which is a nice part of the UK. And you, Matt, are in Toronto, so
I am.
excellent. So yeah, it's great to have Matt on the call today with us on the Leaders Series. He is the VP for Business Development for CashTech, which is a currency product service. Over 20 years experience in a variety of different industries, which we'll kind of talk through. And one of the reasons we're really kind of interested in kind of getting him on is his experience of being a leader in businesses that have kind of set up, that have, progressed to kind of, actually kind of return on investment. We felt that it'd be really interesting for people to kind of hear how that's been done, and some of the things that you've kind of learned. So Matt, it's great to have you here. Do you want to just tell us a little bit more about your kind of current role and a little bit about your background?
Sure. Currently, I work with a company based in Minnesota called
Sure.
CashTech. My role primarily is to focus on the cannabis industry because of the federal legislation surrounding cannabis in the U.S. It's legal on a state level, not a federal level. So banking cash and storing cash securely is a major issue. And CashTech was actually a client of one of my former companies, and they asked me to help them scale out this vertical.
Fantastic. So just for those who don't really know, so I think this is a US thing, not necessarily a Canada thing. I don't know if
This
they've
is
got
US,
different
yes.
rules, a US thing, but obviously it's. I sound a bit like I don't know if you ever watched the film Pulp Fiction, but it's like legal to
Yes.
buy it. It's legal to buy it. It's legal to smoke
Yeah.
it. But so it's because obviously the banks are federal, so they can't touch the money made from it, but it is possible to have the money and sell it. So, but it's very difficult
Yes.
to actually invest it, use it, have a proper business running it.
Yeah, and every state is very different.
Mm.
So the first states like California and Colorado, they had major problems. They had to do payroll with cash.
Mm.
They
Right.
couldn't
Okay.
find a bank to keep it. They had to pay all their suppliers and vendors. Some of those problems have been alleviated,
Mm.
partly because of the hardware and the software and the service that we provide.
Okay.
But banking is illegal at a federal level. So dealing with a Bank of America or a Wells Fargo, they won't touch it. Any
Yeah.
pretty much any national firm that handles the cash cannot touch it.
Mm.
So, which is giving rise to community banks and credit unions that are offering cannabis banking services.
Mm.
It also made it very difficult for people that, let's say owned a dispensary to get a mortgage
Mm.
or a car loan or anything like that. Even though the businesses themselves were doing very well, they had a
Mm.
lot of cash. No one would finance equipment, inventory. They couldn't bank it, and yet they have to store cash to pay federal taxes for when the federal government eventually does come calling. Uh,
Wow.
all while trying to stay out of jail. So it's a very interesting dynamic in the U.S. And like I said, every state is different, which is what kind of attracted me to the opportunity.
Mm.
And I get to work with a lot of great partners across the U.S. To help basically this major problem, which is a lot of cash.
And I guess part of that is, the problem there is obviously what they're trying to do is obviously the government is trying to kind of create a set of situations to decriminalize something that people use, but
Right.
by keeping it all cash, you're basically setting it up to stay criminalized. Because what do people do if they can't put it in the bank and they have cash? They need someone to look after them, and generally that probably puts them back in the hands of the criminals, doesn't it? So,
Well, exactly right. And so part of the solution that we sell are these 1,200-pound machines that will count, validate, and store currency.
right, okay,
So that
yeah,
if a dispensary gets robbed, it's very difficult to actually get at the cash. And we've seen, an increase, to your point, of robberies and things like that at the local dispensary level in a lot of states
yeah.
because they don't have access to the service we provide.
Now, what's interesting about this for me, because obviously I look back for your background, like, investment advisor,
Yes.
VP, Salesforce, obviously you've run a successful recruitment business as well. So I think what's kind of interesting for me is my first question is I reckon this probably wasn't something in 2007. If someone had said you're going to be doing this, that you'd have said, yeah, I see that in the life plan. That's, you're obviously doing well in it, and it's obviously, but would you say yes to that, just out of interest?
100%. My career has taken a lot of different turns. And I think it's probably because of a philosophy that I have, which is, just kind of keeping your perceptive screen open for opportunities,
Right. Okay.
and being continuously curious, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the business ventures I've gotten into is because I was curious about why a particular, industry or product or service was being done the way it was done, and questioning, is there a better way? Is there a different way to do it?
Yeah. And then I think, that's that element of, that element of like being curious is really interesting, because obviously that enables you to move between different, industries, different types of sectors, and still be successful because you're open to these opportunities, which I think is really key. But then the other question I had was, as you kind of come into this, from what I'm hearing is that obviously if you're the VP of business development in this area, then probably the people that you're selling to are slightly different to the people that you might have sold to before. So, for instance, you're selling to kind of owner managers, small kind of establishments, whereas before you've been like kind of a Salesforce, so you're selling to IT managers of major corporates, right? It's a very different kind of background. We'll put Matt's career stuff in the link so you can check this on the thing. But so did you have to kind of retrain yourself, or did you use the same kind of sales leadership skills that you already had and just move them into a new industry?
Yeah, I think, each stage of my career taught me something different that can be transferable. I think one of the biggest, just talking on the recruiting side for a little bit, one of the biggest mistakes I see companies make is thinking that, I need someone with industry experience in order to sell, my product or service. Everyone thinks that their, product or their industry is unique. And the reality is it comes down to a company or a person has a problem and you have a solution. Does it solve their problem? And then it's really following the same set of principles in terms of uncovering what that real need is, and do you have a solution that's going to solve it for them at a price that makes sense? That's it at the end of the day. And I've been able to, basically transfer that same skill set from investment management to recruiting to digital marketing, now to cannabis, and who knows what it will be next.
Yeah, who knows?
But I find that making connections with people and connecting the dots that are hard for some people to see is really my strength, and then presenting that solution.
Yeah. And did you, when you kind of came into that, do you generally set yourself a list to do, 3-month plan, 6-month plan, bringing people together, again, just kind of interested because it's such a different thing to kind of come into. You know, how
Mhm.
did you set yourself out?
I always find it hard, and I used to try to set, 3, 6, 12,
Mm,
5 year plans. And I never seemed to, and I would always look back and go,
mm,
wow, I wasn't even close to where I thought I might be.
mm,
And again, I think it comes down to, you have to constantly, especially nowadays, you have to constantly be reassessing what you're doing. Are we focusing on the right things, on the right
mm,
markets, on the right products, on the right services at the right time? And if you're not constantly reevaluating that, you can miss
mm.
opportunities. And in some cases, they can be really big opportunities.
Yeah, and I think that's key, isn't it? You know, it's kind of, constant reevaluation so that you
Mhm.
know you know where you're going, but things change. Circumstances change, economy changes. In your world, I guess legal changes as well.
Yes,
They could quite
almost every day.
quickly kind of mess up your business, although it might help the pieces. They said, okay, now you can bank with the federal banks, and they're like, oh, okay. So then you'd have to. That would be an issue, I guess, to kind of react to kind of very quickly, if you know what I mean. But
Right.
I guess you think about those things. So one of the things I was quite kind of interested, kind of coming out of that, is obviously again in your career you've specialized in helping to build businesses or building business for yourself, so scaling up businesses and scaling them up
Hmm.
successfully, which is obviously something me myself is always kind of looking to do. What would you say the kind of most common challenges are that organizations kind of wrestle with when they're doing these types of things?
Well, I think that most companies, when they start out, the founder or founders are typically, the salespeople. They're the ones
Mm,
going out and getting the clients and basically proving that that thesis that this product or service is in demand.
mm,
And they get a bunch of clients and they build to a certain level of revenue. And then what I've seen over and over again is they typically stall at that revenue level,
yeah,
and they don't know how to get to, let's say you get to $5 million as a software company. How do I get to, 20
yeah,
million? And understanding that, what got you to 5 million is not what's going to get you to 20 million. And
mm,
where I've had success, and I had a mentor that ran a big company that hit me over the head with this every day,
okay,
which is building, you have to build out business processes.
okay,
That way, if something goes wrong, is it a mistake that someone made, and you can address it, and then that's a coaching opportunity, or is there a flaw in your business process?
mm,
So, with both my recruiting and my digital marketing company, I basically documented a process of how to do everything,
right, okay.
start to finish.
And you yourself did that, like,
I
so it's not like you didn't outsource that to the HR manager.
No.
You wanted to know it for yourself.
Yeah, because when I started my recruiting company, a lot of it was intuitive to me.
Mm,
And then I started hiring people as we scaled, and I
mm,
realized they couldn't bill at the same level that I was billing at. And
mm,
I took a step back and said, well, why is that? And then I started analyzing how they were doing things versus how I was doing things. And then once I created that process, and essentially handed it to all the other people that were working for me, and they started following it, that's when things really took off.
mm.
And with my digital marketing company, I built out a 1,500 step process,
Wow.
for how do we
Is that fifteen
do
hundred
digital.
steps or 1,500 words, Matt?
1,500 steps.
Wow.
um, and the thing is that it was all in my head. I knew how
Right,
to
okay.
do it, but being able to then relate that to people that work for you, is really the biggest barrier. And so I locked myself in a room for 4 days, basically 12 hours a day, and created this process map,
Mm,
that then I could break down into smaller chunks and share with my team. So we had web developers, we had writers, we had social media people, um, and all of them had their own unique role in each step of the process.
mm.
And once we documented it, it became very simple to then add more people, add more clients, because it was very scalable at that point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it allowed you to to have that basis to kind of build on, as it were.
Right.
Yeah, and for yourself, then, that's in some ways that's kind of that's an interesting point, right? Because in some ways that's different to quite a lot of other leaders. It's almost like a scientific thing there. This is the science. This follow this. The only thing I would kind of link that to, and obviously it's a different level of business, is you always think about that McDonald's thing. This is how to make a Big Mac, right? You don't make a Big Mac any other way. It has to always be like this wherever you are in the world. And I guess it's linking into that, isn't it?
Well, what I tried to do is basically, I'm very analytical, and I tried to use data to then support the process. And even people that worked for me that weren't into looking at data started looking at data, which was incredible because it gave you instant feedback. And so even in my recruiting business, we had a tool that we created, which basically would give us a probability of someone being placed at a company, and the probability of revenue. And once my recruiters started,
that sounds great. I could do with that.
Yeah,
please sell it to me.
Yeah. I should have turned that into a business.
That sounds like a brilliant tool. Yeah,
I was working.
Let's get that one out of the cupboard now, Matt.
Yeah, I was working on another business at the time, which took priority, but yeah, once you build out those processes, things go a lot smoother.
And then how then what you were doing there is identifying challenges. I guess this is how you deal with these particular challenges, and I guess that said about that 1,500 step program. But then how did you, as you grew the business, then how would you then get people to believe in this? That this is the Bible. This is what you do. How do you make it like the McDonald's thing? This is the only way to make a Big Mac, right? I think that links into things like business rules, which are quite important in our business, and it's something that I'm, dealing with at the moment as we look to react to different economic pressures, etc., etc. Is what would you say the best ways of making sure this is the Bible that people do care and do follow?
I think it's important to say this is the Bible, but it's not necessarily correct. And I really empowered people to question everything that we did. Okay. And we also had very unique ways. Like I said, basically when something went wrong, we could boil it down to one of two things. Someone made a mistake, or there was a problem with their process. So when something went wrong, if someone made a mistake, we would actually always celebrate their first mistake. We would have, we'd have a pizza party or something like that. Because
depending on how big the mistake was there, Matt, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, there's different kinds of mistakes.
Yeah, that's right.
But if it was something that was a learning experience, I didn't want people to be afraid to make mistakes and break things and question things. So we used to have weekly meetings where I'd come in and say, okay, any new ideas, anything that went right, went wrong, let's talk about them. And if there was a better way of doing something, everyone had the opportunity to contribute, as long as you could back it up with data of how to make things better. So there was never like, this is the only way to do it. Here's the road. We might be better off taking a left here.
And it's a kind of a working document then that people feel empowered by, as opposed to restricted by, I guess, because that would be one of the things you'd say is this restrictive, but I guess kind of thinking about that is different. It's how you present it, I guess.
Yes, and if you create a culture where people feel like they can really make a difference, it's amazing the output you can get from them.
Yeah. Okay. So, taking that forward, and you think about, what you've done, how would you then, what would be the key pieces of advice that you would kind of give to business leaders that want to kind of follow, we all want to follow that, how do I get a business to scale and then manage to get someone to kind of invest in it? What would be the key piece of advice you would talk about there?
Well, number one, document your processes. If you have that, then you have a scalable, sellable business. Because
The
if you
secret
ask a
sauce,
lot of
as it were.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you ask a lot of entrepreneurs what their goal is, everyone has the dream of selling their company to
Mm,
someone for $1 billion and
mm.
retiring somewhere hot.
Yeah.
Um, the reality is that you have to think about, well, why would someone want to buy your business? And even if that's
Mm,
not your ultimate goal, if someone was to come in today and you were to say, here's why you want to buy my business, it is, here's what our, here's what we're really good at. Here's where we
mm,
think we can get to. Here are all of our documented business processes that would be easy for another company to come in and just simply follow and maybe
mm,
take it to greater scale because they have more funding, more people, whatever it might
mm,
be. But and then when you do that, you'll get your company to that next level, and then you can
mm.
decide, what the best step is. But most of what I've done in my career is help companies scale by creating those processes for them, whether
Yeah.
that be how to hire better, how to manage better,
Mm.
how to market better, how to sell better. It's all about creating, a repeatable process that, when I'm long gone, it can still grow the business.
And you've obviously worked in the technology industry. You've worked as an
Mhm.
advisor. You've worked as a CEO. You know, and you've seen different innovations. So what is your, you know, what has been your kind of reaction, and how have you integrated innovations into your processes? Because I guess when we're talking about having this steps of process, what you're also looking is how can I make this process more efficient, right?
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm all about efficiency. I don't
Mm.
like to spend money unless I have to.
Yeah.
And I mean, I would say the biggest example would be how I scaled my recruiting business.
Mm.
Um, you know, we right away the focus was on how do we get people to come to us. So
Yeah.
we built out this inbound marketing engine that helped us grow at 3,000% through the financial crisis.
Mm.
We were on Profit Magazine's Hot 50 list as one of the fastest growing companies, and people asked me, "Well, how did you grow so fast?" And it's because we built out a process for how we market our solutions online. How do we
Mm.
leverage content and social media? How do we maximize the efficiency of our website so that
Mm.
we were generating about 150 new leads a month for our recruiting business, and
Yeah.
these weren't someone just saying maybe I'm interested. These are people saying I need to talk to you today.
Yeah, yeah. And just
um,
just so if people don't know, because they're not in the recruitment industry, I promise you
right.
that's really, really good.
Yes,
That
it
doesn't happen
is.
in the GCS world, I can tell you. I have to work hard for
Yeah.
those things. So yeah.
Well, and the best story I have
Mm,
is, my phone rang one day and I picked it up, and it was the vice president of sales for Apple in Cupertino,
mm,
California.
yeah.
And he said, I was on your website. I read a couple of your blogs and some of your white papers. I'm going to have my legal team send you a contract, and then we'll start working together.
Wow.
And that's how I started working with Apple.
Mm,
But it was all the work in the business processes that allowed us to get to that point. And
mm,
ultimately, when I sold that business, what they really bought was the engine that I created, right? And the brand,
mm.
because they tried to replicate what we had done for years, and finally just said, well, if you can't beat them, buy them.
Wow, fantastic. Yeah, and I think the other thing that's interesting about that is obviously, alongside the recruitment business, you're able to create that kind of digital marketing business as well. So,
Well,
that was
that's
that.
exactly
Yeah,
what
yeah,
happened.
yeah,
Once we were on that Hot 50 list, I had recruiting clients saying, "Well, can you do that for us?" And then I had to
yeah.
create basically it became very simple because I had already built out the processes. Now we just
Mm,
had to tweak them a little bit for how do we do it for another company.
mm.
And once we did that, that business scaled even faster, and that's what kind of precipitated me selling the recruiting business,
Fantastic. Yeah.
because that business was growing so quickly.
Well, I mean, just personal questions. You obviously you've had those successes, and I'm assuming probably those things that have happened have allowed you to have a good life. What now? What now drives you? Because you're obviously not the sort of person that's like, cool, yeah, that's it. I'll
Yeah.
sit back and then go live in somewhere hot, that sort of thing. So what now drives you?
Basically the same thing that's always driven me.
Mm,
I look at a lot of companies, like the company I'm working for now. Their
mm,
issue was cash is dwindling.
yeah,
Here's an industry that's exploding with cash. How do
yeah.
we take advantage of that? And there's going to be something else that comes along that will be the same thing. Um,
So just to stop you there, so there's just
mhm.
obviously that's really interesting. So if you go into like a cannabis dispensary, could you not use Apple Pay then? So they can't take you have to take your payment in cash.
Yeah, they have to
That's
take
crazy,
everything in
isn't it?
cash. Visa,
Yeah.
MasterCard, everything's illegal. You can't use Interact, debit, anything. Now in Canada, it's very different, but
Mm,
in the US, it's 90% of the transactions are done in cash.
wow.
There
Yeah.
are some companies that are taking payments, but that's a very dangerous game to play.
Wow. Yeah.
And
Okay.
a
So
lot of
yeah.
those are getting shut down.
So to get back to the more
Yes.
kind of, I'm just fascinated by it. It's great. It's an interesting. It's like an industry growing in front of your very eyes, isn't it? And that's
Right. And
yeah.
I think that that kind of answers your question, which is
Mm,
really, I, like getting up in the morning and being presented with a challenge that no one really has an answer for.
yeah.
And, when I tell my kids what I do for a living, I always say I connect dots. So
Mm,
I try to, see a problem that no one really has a solution for, and how do I connect the dots to bring it together and create that solution?
mm.
And that's essentially what I've done over the last 18 months, and what I've done basically my whole career.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And for you, kind of looking forward now, for this business and the kind of role you're in, the kind of industry you're in, I guess now. But what are your kind of key priorities, as a leader of this business?
Really, just making sure that we're efficient with our time. We have a very small team, and part of the reason we have a small team is because we are efficient. We
Mm,
need to be leveraging and building out some more processes. Now that we've identified truly what the sweet spot is, we have to
mm,
then build out the process for how do we deal with a community bank, a credit union, because again, state by state, it's very different.
yeah,
So we have to say, okay, now who are all the players? How do we basically roll this solution out? And a lot of the banks were looking for someone to kind of bring all the pieces together. And so
yeah,
we've done that now. We've replicated that from multiple banks. And now it's just getting in front of more banks and showing them how to do it.
yeah, yeah. Now how to kind of how to kind of interact with this and do it
Right.
legally and in a
Hmm.
compliant way, so that everyone stays the right side of the law, if you know what I mean.
Yes. And I always
And
state I'm not a lawyer, so don't
yeah,
ask
yeah,
me for the
yeah,
legal
that's
advice
right,
on it.
yeah. So as you're doing this now, and like you talked about the processes, would you then now be trying to build in and bring in some of your experiences from potentially the kind of the digital marketing? Do you have competitors out there like other companies that are doing this? So obviously you've got to try and present the best service, but also you've got to look at how to stay ahead of the game.
Yes, I mean, the one nice thing about the company I'm working for, they were a client of my digital marketing business. So we already have a bit of a head start because we're generating, about 10,000 unique visits a month
Mm,
to our site. But I use kind of the processes from my recruiting business to bring on a new
mm,
account executive. We'll be building and we'll be leveraging things like, the new AI technology that's come out. um, we had Chat GPT write a number of blogs for us that were incredible,
yeah,
that
yeah,
we'll be
yeah.
publishing. So it's always about what's next, how can we stay ahead, who's coming. There's lots of software programs that you can track what competitors are doing online. Fortunately, in this industry, it's relatively little, which
Mm,
gives us a huge competitive advantage and gives us a runway over some of the bigger companies that can't go after this
yeah.
space because of the laws.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's really, really interesting. And so you just to mention there, Chat GPT, and we're obviously on the kind of innovation side. You're obviously someone that thinks about process. So how are you? you know, have you now put that into your process? Do you think it's a game changer? Is it a, you know, I'm
Yeah.
not entirely sure myself. You know, maybe I'm a bit of a philistine, but I don't know.
Well, it's interesting. I wrote an article for Forbes. I actually was just rereading it this week. I guess in end of 2017, I wrote it about
Mm,
how artificial intelligence was going to eliminate millions of sales jobs. And, at the time, I didn't even know how they were going to, but I just knew there were a lot of lower level sales jobs that were going to be affected because, just automated, outreach on whether it's LinkedIn or email. There's a lot of automation that was already taking place. And I just knew it was a matter of time before AI optimized that.
mm,
And now, after playing around with OpenAI's platform, I haven't 100% figured it out, but I found a number of uses
mm,
that can certainly help me. I have some friends that are CFOs of large reinsurance companies, real estate companies, and they're finding ways to use it for actuarial
mm,
calculations and looking up, problems that they're identifying in whether it be tax or legal advice. So
mm.
it's really interesting how people are starting to use it, but I'm not sure really how it's going to shape what I'm doing right now. Um, but I've found a couple of uses for it immediately,
Okay,
which
that's
are
really
saving a lot of time.
yeah. And I think again, it's like putting it into the process, isn't it? You know, making sure
Yep.
that you know you can help your process, make you more efficient. And yeah, you know, it's definitely something that we in our business are kind of looking at. Um, but like you said, I mean, you know, probably for me, the learn from me for this is to really get that process down. You know, this is how we do things. You know,
Yes.
and get that right. You know, and you know, there's some homework for me there. So yeah,
Well,
brilliant.
yeah. And it's actually interesting you say that because
Mm,
if you're looking to hire employees
mm,
and you say to them, I have a process for doing this, it
mm.
makes you more attractive as a
Yeah,
potential
totally. Yeah,
employer as well.
we very much know that within the companies that we work with. You know, they're the ones that seem well organised and are able to build people's careers and you know
Right.
push things forward together are the ones that generally people kind of go for. Whereas the ones that are a
Right.
bit haphazard and don't seem to have a plan and don't seem to have a vision are the ones that people generally don't. So, yeah,
Yeah.
then I think it's been a very interesting conversation with myself as well, Matt. So I think you know my last question for you really is you know we're talking there about you know um, how to progress and how to kind of scale and how to kind of build these businesses. You know, my last question for you is really you know how do you kind of you know deal with you know the fact that that's going to kind of happen you know and you're kind of working towards that you know again this is for people that may be looking to do this and maybe sometimes it doesn't happen you know and maybe sometimes you know you're working towards this and there's that disappointment element or you know you have to do these things because this is happening you know how do you kind of there's a kind of two speed thing that happens sometimes so how do you deal with that because I think that's sometimes something that people struggle with.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of the companies that I've, worked with in the past, they do kind of get frozen a little bit of kind of the deer in the headlights where they
Mm,
don't know. And as long as you don't take big risks,
mm,
that could put the business in jeopardy. Trying something different is you always have to be thinking a little bit different. And there are
yeah.
some people that they think they want to scale their business, but it could be a
Mm,
very good lifestyle business,
yeah,
and
yeah,
there's no
yeah.
need for it, and you don't really need to.
Mm,
And you might be perfectly happy, and that's fine. I think we talk way too much in the business world about how everything has to be, $1 billion valuation. And
yeah, yeah, the unicorn. Yeah,
I know a lot of very successful, wealthy people that you've never heard of and you never will, but
yeah,
they're living a pretty good life.
yeah. Because you know, $10 million valuation. If that's you own that valuation, then that's just as
Yeah,
good, isn't it? Really, in some ways. So
exactly.
yeah, yeah. Brilliant. Okay, so Matt, it's been really, really interesting today. I really appreciate taking your time.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Just some of the real kind of interesting stuff. I watched your I watched the company with interest now to see how you're kind of growing alongside the industry. And I think thank you very much for your time and thanks for your insights. So
Thank you, David.